Right, welcome everyone. And today what we are doing is we're chatting to Sam Paddock from Get Smarter, and we are looking at the topic of the Rockefeller Habits from the Scaling Up book from Verne Harnish. Sam, welcome to the session, and thank you so much for taking your time out of the day. I know you're a very busy man, but yeah, thanks for being here and for sharing some of your experiences.
Great to be here, Linky.
Just for those who don't know, Sam is the co-founder of Get Smarter, and they've built a really successful business around Get Smarter and then eventually sold it to you. So Sam, just on that, super congratulations. I remember that whole process, and also when the news broke around you that you guys are selling, very proud of it, and very happy to see how everything worked out for you. So that's a massive, massive heads up and thumbs up for you. Well done.
Thank you. Thank
you. Just as a question, I'm sure some people would like to know, and I know you're in the same boat as me in terms of parenting multiples, which is a whole entrepreneurial journey on its own. But totally. What does life look like after Get Smarter? What are you up to? What are you doing? So just give us a little bit of background.
So Linky, the Get Smarter journey was a decade-long one for me, 9 years actually. And it was kind of characterized by almost absolute dedication to building the business. Of course, the way these things work is you kind of realize at some point that you actually got to be building yourself before you build a business. As business is generally a manifestation of kind of one's own journey. It took me a long time to figure that out, to be clear. But so that journey, by contrast to what's happening now, that journey for me was characterized by almost total dedication and a lot of change, a lot of personal growth. Then it is relevant to say that the decision to sell was somewhat based on many factors. One of which were the fact that my wife was pregnant with twins, and I know you know what that feels like. But it's funny. Yeah, sometimes these things happen. I'm not particularly spiritual, but that's one of the times in my life when I saw the universe aligning in some form, which is beyond my comprehension. And so I made the decision. It was part of the decision to change that total dedication to one entity, being Get Smarter, and spread that out. So the answer, the very long answer that I'm not giving you to your short question, is that the post Get Smarter journey for me has been one of a far broader set of focus, while the kids have been in the first 3 years of their lives, and is kind of balanced between by being a super active dad, and then investing in a range of businesses. Not too many. I thought I'd do more. I'm not. It's 3 businesses at the moment, and very involved in one of them, and really enjoying that as well. So that's kind of the feeling. And then the final piece is looking after and building our family farm, which has become a really great place to escape and connect with ourselves and the people who matter most. So that's the post Get Smarter experience so far.
Yeah, I didn't imagine that it's only going to be one business. I can't see you sitting still, to be honest. Yes,
no, as much as I would have liked.
A few businesses.
As much as I would have.
3. Yeah. Awesome. And like the business of twins is is something on its own as well. So yeah,
you are right.
You are right. So I remember I listened to a talk once with you. I think it was a EO talk where you spoke about the Rockefeller Habits and the one place strategic plan from the Scaling Up book that really supported you guys in building the business into kind of a successful machine. Now, what I would like to explore today is a little bit more on the Rockefeller Habits. Because there's so many habits that one can look at, and it gets overwhelming when you start looking at these habits. You don't know where to start. So I'm hoping that you can give us some guidance in terms of these things. Now, if you think about entrepreneurs in general, when they're starting the scaling up journey with the Gazelle's approach, for example, some people are only starting to get traction, and other businesses are already turning large amount of revenue. But the Rockefeller Habits are new to everyone who's just starting this journey. So what should you focus on when you start with the Rockefeller Habits? I mean, is there something around the main 2 habits that you can follow, that like the primary habits, and then maybe even 3 or 4 secondary habits that you should follow? Like, how do we tackle this?
That's a great question. I have so many ways of So there's no short answer. I think when we were originally exposed to the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits book by Verne Harnish, the gentleman his name was Dan Devine, had built a very successful education company in the US. And his advice to us was read this book and do 90% of what's in it.
Okay.
And that's kind of
a lot.
like do this, and although, he had met us, we'd had breakfast with him, we had given him a sense of where we were at. And as a result of that, he said, this is the sort of book, it would be good for you. There may be other entrepreneurs in positions where they've already implemented a lot of what those habits are. And maybe that's not quite the diagnosis and advice for them. For us, where we were was we had caught this business and we had started growing it. And yet we had kind of hit our own ceiling, our own ceiling of what was possible without kind of pulling in things from the outside. Yeah. And I think what the Rockefeller Habits do so well is they kind of give you the chance to stand on the shoulders of all the giants, all the management consulting giants and entrepreneurial giants who've come before you in a very structured way, almost like paint by numbers, which is one of the reasons I liked it so much. It was like, you sit as an entrepreneur, you have customers paying you money, you might be, to your point, at the beginning of that journey or somewhat quite far advanced along it. But, and so you've got something of value and people are paying you for it. But how you then manage that and design it strategically and executionally to scale up so you can do more of it over time without breaking is kind of one of those challenges that a lot of people sit with. And there's 45, 50 years of good management, business management literature out there that are just very difficult to digest. And what Verne had done so well after being a management consultant for 30 years is package that in a way which really was digestible by entrepreneurs in various stages of startup. So for us, we needed all of it. we needed a ton of it. There were some things we were doing okay, but we needed a lot of it. And for others, it was different. For us, for me, very specifically, I had two kind of areas I need to focus on. I needed focus. I wasn't focused. Often entrepreneurs are quite chaotic. I was constantly running at the next new thing, etc. I needed focus. I needed to say, what's the right thing to do? What's the one thing we can win at? What are we going to go do that? And that was kind of the in fact, I can roll both points into one. It was focus for me. It was like, what is the right thing to do? Which is like a question of strategy, and then go and do that in an accountable way. And so we needed that whole one-page strategy plan to be implemented, which is what I did. I took that on and did that for the first 3 months, just shoved it into the organization, because what it did was it forced us to for the first time, write down on one page what we were doing. And that's fundamentally strategic. It's also fundamentally the scientific method. Have a hypothesis, write it down, test it, review it, get other people's opinions on it, evolve it. That's the process. So it's sensible thinking. We hadn't done it before. Strategy lived in the corridors between me and my brother as we kind of jumped from one thing to the next thing. But for the first time, we actually wrote it down. So focus based on writing something down was probably the first piece for us. But at different times, different habits became very useful to us. So I think the short answer is no one habit that rules them all. But I think that the thoughtful getting it in, putting that one-page strategy plan in place, then wrapping it in the meeting rhythms, priorities, and data that the book recommends is super useful. So that's a long answer. We needed it all. For me, it was about knowing where we were at. We were unfocused. Other entrepreneurs will be focused. Therefore, they'll pull other habits in that are useful. We needed just to get everything written down on one page so we understood what we were doing, which is the first step.
And then just a quick question on that, where you say you needed it all. What was that journey timeline almost where you started when you worked through it all? What was that timeline like?
I do everything very quickly. It's just the way I'm wired. So after it was kind of very clear that this was the right thing to do, we implemented the entire Rockefeller Habits in, I think it was 10 weeks, everything in. And that was, everything.
That's motivation for people.
But having said that, the quality of that first iteration was average. It was good to have it in, but it took us, by contrast, it took us 2 years to think that way, and accountable, write it down, write it down in a university understood format, values, purpose, sandbox, product geography, customer, how are we going to win in brand promise, what's our profit per X, through to priorities, through to themes throughout the organization. There's all way of thinking, and then wrapping that in like daily stand-ups and weekly one-on-ones and monthly management team meetings and bi-monthly strategy councils, all that stuff. You know, I think what it was clear for me is that it takes a while for that to become the DNA of the organization. It's actually one of the reasons I've seen the implementation of the Rockefeller Habits fail time and time again, almost exclusively, because it's not the leader who implements it. But that's too simple a statement. It's not about the leader implementing it. It's about the leader adopting it. It's about saying, I will now operate this way. And therefore, because I operate this way, as is the case with, you know, the reciprocal social process of leadership is followership, and people will follow you in that. But if you don't do it, I've seen a ton of CEOs say like, oh, HR will implement. Well, you're wasting your time. Like that's just a really terrible like idea. That's fundamentally misunderstanding how things happen. So that might just be paying lip service to someone who wants this sort of framework in. But the point for me is, it's actually the change in the operating in the MO of the leader that changes everything else. The Rockefeller Habits are just the structure you implement to do that. So for me, it was about becoming accountable. It was about being clear about what we were doing, clarity of what we were doing, writing it down, sharing with others, having other people feel like they were also invested in what we were doing by changing it with us, setting joint priorities, holding myself and other people accountable to what they said they were going to do, using data to get a heads up on like whether we were on track or not, and then repeating that every 3 months. And it took us 2 years to get to the point where we actually had a strategic breakthrough in the way we thought about our business. And that's what then led to the kind of exponential growth of the business. But 10 weeks to get it in, 2 years of hard work to actually change fundamentally how we were doing it and get to the point where it was, we had like a really inspired moment. Of course, that's an inspired 2 years, right? You don't like change yourself at that time. It's not the moment. Yeah. It's that you're working towards becoming a better business person. That's what you're doing. Becoming, in fact, in many ways, you're becoming a better thinker overall. And that was the seed of it.
That's really good to hear. So so it can be implemented quite quickly, but then it's the journey afterwards that kind of where the hard work is also at, especially, and then, or if I, in summary, is you as the leader, you have to also drive it and live it. You can't just go to a team and say, execute. It needs to be a part of your DNA as the leader in the business, from what I'm hearing.
I mean, absolutely. And I'm not even sure there's any, I think that statement is true for everything a leader does.
Yeah.
Like, it's you got to feel it yourself first.
Sure. Now, like you mentioned, it took you about 2 years, and then things started shifting and stuff like that. Which habit? And this is probably a bit of an unfair question, but which habit was implemented or executed, did things start getting traction for you? Can you remember a specific habit that like changed it around? Like, whoa, things have shifted.
There were two. The one is the daily stand-up, which I think just every organization should have. Yeah. I think for the first time, it creates that pulse throughout the organization every day that lifts the explicit like statement of what people are intending to do. It gives you that chance every morning to say, hey, are we aligned? Like, are we not aligned? Because then you can you can solve for that and you can fix the alignment quite quickly. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we started implementing in businesses I'm involved in now, we start implementing daily checkouts, which is like the kind of the top and the tail to that, like top of the DSU, and then the tail is like, what did I actually do today? Especially in operating in these predominantly virtual times, I think that's super useful. And I guess the second is not so much a habit as it is just like the process of strategic thinking. Writing it down, understanding what like you're meant to be doing, really grappling with the fit between all the elements on the one-page strategic plan. Like, what value supports, is this value consistent with the purpose? Does this choice of sandbox actually like give rise to this underlying desire to like change the world in your purpose? Like, are we actually focusing on the right unit economic or profit per X? Like, what priorities this quarter will take us closer to how we make a stronger business? Like, all those things you think like in this very wide open view of what all the different pieces, how they add together to make you strong and robust in a competitive environment. That's what really changed it for me. And I think that was where we had the outsized gains, was 2 years of like, oh my gosh, we're not just going to think tactically and from like, you know, day to day and week to week, but actually we're going to think about the whole landscape, the whole competitive landscape, and ask ourselves, what makes Get Smarter stronger? Like, and it might take 9 months to do it, but like, what would that thing be? And maybe there's something we can do in a week, and maybe there's something we can do in 2 years, but get that right, because that's actually what makes us stronger over time. Linky, just a note, I'm off in 3 minutes. Apologies on this, on my next.
All good. There was one more question that I had, and was there any habit that you feel that you left it for too late that would have made a big difference in your business?
I mean, I wish we had come across the book earlier. That's the first piece. Sometimes, you know, we actually needed to almost fail, I think, before we were like ready to accept that some outside influence. I think that's probably maybe the timing couldn't have been changed there. Was there a habit that we left too late? I think the habit of reviewing the habits. I mean, that sounds like ridiculous, but I think even by the end of the time it gets smarter, I wasn't like, I think the discipline of going back and like saying, okay, which habit, like of those list of habits, like which one do we have to work on next? And Verne talks about this in the book. Like that's what I wish we would have done more of. I think we should have done more of it, and we could have done more of it. And that is not to say, but I'm I'm hard on myself, so I'll always look for the things we could have done better. But that's probably the one area I think we could have done better, with just looking at the habits in every quarter and saying, what's the next one to focus on now, or next two.
So like almost like a quarterly review of the laser sharp focus of what it is that you needed.
Yeah, the health of the habits. Like what are they? You rate them on green, yellow, red, and just see which one you need more work on. I think we were probably doing it implicitly, but I think we could have raised it up and done better work if we had asked everyone.
And then lastly, because I know you have to go, any kind of message out there for the entrepreneurs that are starting this journey or wanting to scale in the times that we are in, like anything that comes up for you in terms of what you want to say that they can take away?
Maybe to end on a philosophical note, Viktor Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that so much of meaning is driven by suffering and hardship. And he launched a whole field of psychotherapy called logotherapy, which is finding the meaning in the hardship. But it's fascinating for me. Business is hard. It's really hard, and that's the reason many people shy away from that pain. And yet, like if we take Ray Dalio's kind of recent book Principles, he writes in it, one of his formulas is that the idea that if you it's the pain, basically progress is defined by pain and reflection. So like you're not really progressing unless you're like experiencing some form of pain and then reflecting on that pain. And I think the message I have is that business is the most incredible vehicle for self-development and development of, and achievement of purpose, and meaning in one's life. It is the most incredible vehicle for that. And by definition, it is hard. It is really hard. And so finding the tools out there, the people, the resources, the Rockefeller Habits is just a book, but it's a really good book. And then finding mentors out there who give up their time and energy to help support you, and actively reading and seeking the improvement of business. Well, you end up improving yourself. You end up discovering oneself. You end up like really reaching into that age-old saying of know thyself, and that's the business. At some point, it becomes difficult to distinguish between the business's progress and your progress, or your progress and the business's progress, because actually they kind of they dovetail so beautifully, and they're interrelated, inextricably interrelated. And I think that for me, I want to encourage people who are having a difficult time in business to know that that's kind of the path. The obstacle is the way. It is a really meaningful journey, and there's no other way, in my experience, to develop that meaning and purpose other than through kind of overcoming those obstacles, leaning into those hard times and getting right. So we are in the middle of hard times. Many people have said it's unprecedented times. That has sped up a lot of what's happening in business and the world and families generally. And my message is stay the course, because this is where meaning is born.
Yeah, stay the course and reflect on it. I hear from you. What I hear from you. Yeah,
totally.
Sam,
thank you so much for joining.
Always lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much.
So wonderful to chat to you.
We'll see each other soon, I'm sure. Enjoy. Good. And thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Real pleasure. All the best.
Thanks, dude. Bye.
Yeah.